Welcome to the Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. We're thrilled to take you on a monthly journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. From the coolest gadgets lighting up your Instagram feeds to groundbreaking services revolutionizing our daily lives, we're here to spotlight the innovations and, more importantly, the innovators. So gear up for an energetic and informative ride as we delve deep into the stories, the challenges, and the triumphs of the creative geniuses shaping our future. This is Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. And now your host, A.D. Edwards.
What if you could turn a $24 lawn mowing gig into a billion-dollar franchise empire? Well, today's guest did just that. Jim Penman, founder of Jim's Group, started out as a struggling Ph.D. student with a side hustle. And against all odds, he transformed that hustle into one of the largest franchising networks in the world, spanning over 5,000 franchisees across Australia and beyond. But this isn't just a story about mowing lawns. It's about resilience, rejection, and the relentless pursuit of a vision when everyone else doubts you. Jim shares the roadblocks he faced, the systems that allowed him to scale, and the soul-testing lessons that he learned when the stakes were at the highest. If you've ever wondered how to grow something from nothing, or why franchising can be a game changer, or even how to bounce back when you're at rock bottom, this conversation will give you the raw insight you need. Welcome to Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. Jim, welcome to our show.
Good to be here.
You have an interesting story, sir. First of all, tell our listeners and viewers where you are right now.
Melbourne,
in the
Australia.
world. So you're in Australia.
Yep.
And many people in Australia are familiar with what you have brought to market. But some of our audience from other parts of the world may not be familiar. However, they still need to hear this story. So you created this business, and you've been doing this for quite some time. But I want to go back to the beginning. Growing up, did you ever imagine yourself as an entrepreneur, or did that path just reveal itself later?
No, I never had any idea being an entrepreneur until I was basically 30. So not part of my childhood dream. Maybe a doctor or a vet or later on a science fiction writer, academic, anything but an entrepreneur. No idea.
So you started a business just really mowing lawns. It was a side hustle. So I guess it wasn't a business at first. And at the time of doing this, you were pursuing your Ph.D. What drove you to turn this side hustle into something bigger?
Well, I intended to be an academic. I had a way of approaching. I wanted to understand the reason for the rise and fall of civilization, basically the biggest task you could possibly do. So I developed these ideas for about 10 years at university, a very radical way of understanding society. And I came to the end of my PhD and I realized there was absolutely no prospect of any kind of academic career. And I wanted to pursue my research, but the whole emphasis of the research was into physiology and genetics and so forth, rather than history as such. So I was going to need a lot of money. So at the age of 30, basically having failed in my academic career, deeply in debt, I decided I need to go out there and make a fortune somehow so I could fund my research. That was the start.
So this is interesting because while you were doing this, pursuing this academic goal, you decided you need to make a little money. And your answer was not to go get a job, but to do something on your own. Now, were there any entrepreneurs in your family?
No, not at all. Nothing. My father was an engineer, consultant, and so forth. My mother was a teacher. You have to go back generations to find any entrepreneurial talent in my family. So I'm the weird one.
So that's interesting to know because some people feel that, well, I was in a family of entrepreneurs, and that's why this person has the edge, and it's not always like that. So, at what point did you realize that academia rather wasn't for you, and it wasn't your life's calling, and you decided to go in the direction of the business instead?
Well, it really was, and it is my life calling. It's just that I was assuming that people would accept my ideas enough to be able to get some sort of academic post that I continued to pursue it. That was my expectation. It was only when that failed. See, lawn mowing was my part-time student job, and it was a good job because basically it was outside, it was physical. I like gardens. I still like gardening for fun. So it was outside, fresh air, exercise, and it paid much better than any normal job. I could charge by the job rather than by the hour. So it was a good, enjoyable part-time job. But when I finished and I realized I had no prospect of an academic career, I didn't know how to do anything else. I never even considered looking for a job with anybody else. I just said I have to make a fortune because I didn't want just an ordinary job. I had to make millions. I'm spending several $1 million a year on my project now. I couldn't have done that with any normal job. So I had to become rich somehow. That was the decision, the age of 30.
Okay. Why did you choose franchising as your growth model rather than just building a traditional company?
Well, I didn't initially. When I started off, initially it was me pushing a lawnmower around, mowing lawns. That was my job. I started doing it part-time. I did it full-time. And then I wanted to grow. So I thought, okay, I started putting on subcontractors to help me. And then I started building up and selling lawn mowing rounds. So that was working okay. I paid off my debt, bought a house. It was going all right. And then this competitor came in, this franchising company from Adelaide came to Melbourne. They had hundreds of franchisees. And my thought was that these guys would crush me. So I actually approached them initially and said, I really don't want to compete with you guys. You're obviously so good at what you do. What if I just help to build up your company in my state? And they said, no, not surprisingly, really. So I thought, okay, better find out what they're doing just as there's any way I can compete with them. So there was a franchising expo that year in 1988. And I went up to the stand and I said to them, I'm very interested in your company. Please tell me about it. So the guy there started giving me some information, how it worked and stuff, gave me this brochure. And then the state manager came on the stand and he kicked me off. He said, that's Jim Penman. Don't tell him anything else. But I knew a lot.
Really?
I looked at it and I saw that I could see some benefits in what they were doing. I saw there was benefits in being a franchisee, ongoing support and, care if you get sick or something like that. There was benefits. But I also thought maybe I can produce a system that would be better for the franchisees. And that might allow me to compete with these guys, even though I had not much money or experience or anything. So that was the start of it. Then I spent 9 months getting a contract together, mostly arguing with lawyers because they kept on wanting me to take more power into my hands. And they said, you're being too nice. And I said, no, I'd want a system that I want to join. I thought of every possible protection and benefit I give to my franchisees, security, things to stop me from doing anything that would be bad for them. And then I signed my first franchisee in June 1989. And somebody at the time asked me how many franchisees I might have one day. And I said, look, maybe if it goes well, maybe 100. So I didn't have big hopes
Well,
for it.
you surpassed that. You surpassed that by a great deal. You're over 5,000.
Yeah, about bit over 5,500 now and growing. Yeah.
So, what gave you the confidence that franchising could work on such a massive scale?
Well, don't forget, in the beginning, it wasn't a massive scale. I didn't even think of going outside Melbourne. I mean, we're now in Australia, New Zealand, in British Columbia. It just didn't even occur to me. In fact, I didn't at the time think that was the likely thing to succeed. I started a number of the businesses. I tried running a computer shop for a while, a mower repair shop, tried to get a holiday resort going. I've done numerous other things. It's just that the lawn mowing thing seems to work the best. So I persisted with that. And that was surprisingly successful. But I didn't expect it. I just kept on looking to improve what I did. It wasn't one thing. It was a whole lot of minor, minuscule changes. Like when I was mowing lawns, I was always trying to save, a few seconds, emptying a grass bag or getting out a tree or something. I was always looking at ways of improving. And I've always done that. So going from a one-man lawn mowing business to a 5,500 franchisees is a matter of thousands of little tiny experiments.
Yes, yes. Um, what did franchising allow you to achieve that other business models could not?
Well, initially I had subcontractors, but the problem was I didn't have any good system of controlling them. So the standard of work was very high. And I thought that one of the things I could achieve with franchising was a better level of customer service. Because my own customer service was great, but my subbies weren't all that good. So I knew that would stop me growing. And I thought people that own their own business, if I could work out a way to support them, you could go beyond that. Franchising is very powerful because you don't get a high margin. We only take about 6% of turnover from our franchisees. That's an average. Um, and but you don't do a lot. You run regular meetings, you talk to them. Ideally, you ring them once a week, you answer their calls, you run advertising, you do things that you can look after 50 or 100 franchisees just by yourself under our system. It's very, very strongly computerized. So that was the benefit. So I could get great service, I could get scale. And what I didn't quite understand at the beginning was that there's a big difference. If you've got 2 or 3 trucks driving around, you don't get much awareness. But by the time you've got 50 or 100 or 200, you become a household name and it's much easier to find work.
Yes, that's true. But when you first started, it was just you. It wasn't Jim's group. It was just you, Jim.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to say get the first franchise up? What time span?
I've started mowing full time in December 1982, and I launched my first franchisee in June 1989. So just a bit under 7 years.
Okay. So did you face any skepticism or resistance from others about franchising when you first started to talk about this and planning it together, to
No,
put together rather?
no, people mostly thought it was a good idea. Everybody knew what franchising was. It wasn't so much the idea was in the air. Australia is one of the most heavily franchised countries on earth. We've got more franchisees per capita than almost anybody. So it's kind of in the air. My problem wasn't so much that I hadn't thought of franchising is I couldn't see I couldn't sell a franchise unless I believed in it. I just had to think there was something in it, and I couldn't for a long time understand. See, I used to build and sell lawn mowing rounds, and I could understand that. You build regular customers, you sell them to somebody, they've got an existing business. But I thought, why would a person who's already got regular customers want to keep on paying me fees? And it took me quite a while and this competitor to actually figure out what I could do for them, like the ongoing support and the meetings and the looking after somebody and helping them to sell if they want to get out of the business and looking after them if they get ill or anything like that. There's a lot of reasons and better software, just coaching, training, improving. I had to work out what I was going to give my franchisees to make it worthwhile for them to want to keep on paying me fees. See, one of the radical things that I did in the beginning was that I actually said to them, listen, you can buy a franchise. If you're not happy with it, you can just walk away. Just take your signs off, go independent. Now, these days we charge a small fee, about $5,000 if they want to do that, but we don't make it difficult. So you have to work out a way for a franchisee to want to stay with you. That's the key.
You,
They got to see
you
benefit.
have to make it attractive for them.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things is
Attractive for
the
them.
fees
Yeah.
are very modest. I mean, you talked before about $1 billion company, and that makes it sound like I'm a billionaire. In fact, I'm a tiny fraction of that because $1 billion you might turn over, but my share of that maybe 1%. So it's scale rather than they're quite narrow margins.
Speaking of scale, when you look back, what were the critical systems or principles you put in place that allowed Jim's group to scale up?
Look, basically, any franchise can scale up. I started with 3 fundamental principles, which is if you see my email, they're on the bottom of the email and they're in my book and they're everywhere else. Our first priority is the welfare of franchisees. We put franchisees first. They're the top priority because our growth is determined by franchisees, not by clients. We've got plenty of clients. Second, we are also passionate about customer service. So we're emotionally committed to customer service. Thirdly, we sign only franchisees and franchisors we are convinced will succeed. The hardest thing is to get that culture right, to teach people to really care. Once you're a franchisor, you look after franchisees, what you do, and it's important to do it. Just this morning, I was doing a training session for new franchisors. There was about 10 of them in the room, and I talked about selection and and why we select and how we select and why it's so important and how you put your franchisees first. So you're constantly talking and indoctrinating and setting up systems and providing support. I take franchisees very seriously. At training, I give every single one of my franchisees my direct email address and phone number and invite them repeatedly to ring me anytime, email me anytime, and I respond very quickly. That's part of the system.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the struggles, the obstacles, the roadblocks you faced, because all entrepreneurs face them. Now, you began your company with just $24. What were the biggest challenges of building with such limited resources?
Well, paying the rent for a start. My wife wasn't working. She was a student. So I was there. I had very heavy debts. So at the end of every month, I had to find the rent. I had to find the money to make payments on the debts, which my parents guaranteed. So it was very, very tight. We lived really simply, like, for, great night out. We would walk down to the local library because that's free. And then we walk back, we'd go by the fish and chip shop and couldn't even afford fish. It was things like dim sims and chips and stuff. That was the big nut because it cost virtually no money at all. So we were very poor for quite a time until things started to pick up a little bit.
So you were living frugally.
Very. I am
So
notorious. I'm a notorious miser even today. I'll always go to the supermarket. I'll look to the bottom shelf where the shop brand stuff is. My wife complains. She says, you should get the branded stuff. So I said, no, the shop brand is good enough.
yes, I agree with you on that. How did you handle rejection, both from potential customers and early franchisees?
Well, I sort of didn't. When I was talking about customers, I actually found it pretty good. 'Cause most people are desperate for good service. That's my experience. If you look after customers well, it's very, very easy to find and keep customers. That's why I kept on. I paid off my debts by building up and selling lawn mowing rounds because I found it very easy to do. Because people are desperate. You go in there, you turn up on time, you ring them back when you should, you do a good job. And I was really meticulous about quality of work. People love you and they say, oh, can you do me? And can I do my neighbor? And I've got a friend. And it was just easy to pick up customers. Now, when it comes to franchisees, I actually had a lot of problem in the beginning, not so much selling franchise, selling lawn mowing rounds, because I'm not a very, I don't have very good people skills. I'm a notorious introvert. My wife says I've got, Asperger's. I'm awkward in the extreme. And I found it very impossible. It's only when I went to see a guy in my church who actually was in advertising, and I was asking about advertising. He spent a half an hour talking to me about advertising, how to advertise, where to advertise. And I walked out of the office. He actually said to me, at the moment, you don't need an advertising agency. Just go and do what I've said to you. And when I walked out of the office, I knew that if I ever needed an advertising agency, I'd go straight back to him. And yet when I was thinking about it, walking back to the car, I thought, this guy hasn't told me anything about his business. I didn't know what they charge. I don't know his clients. I know nothing. But I would use him definitely. He's completely sold me on his business. And then I realized I was walking back to the car. The reason that he'd sold me was because his sole interest was in my benefit, my welfare. And because of that, he'd sold me on his. So I decided to try and apply that to selling lawn mowing rounds. So instead of trying to sell somebody a business, I started giving them advice. I asked them, do you know what the cut of a lawn mowing round means? How you value it? And I give them advice and talk to them about it. And even when they come to see me, the same thing. I just give them advice. And at the end of the conversation, I say, I've got some business in your area. This is it. That was my sales pitch. It wasn't really selling. Short one afterwards, somebody rang me who'd been to see me. And he said, I want your advice on whether to buy. There's another business in my area. I want you to advise me whether to buy this business or yours. So I thought, I've got to make this real. So I asked his advice. I said to him about the business. I said, how many customers? How far apart are they? How long have you been doing it for? What's you going to be doing in the future? Just obvious questions you'd need to know to about your business. And I said, that's a better business by that one. 3 people asked me in quick succession for advice. Each time I told them to go elsewhere, but each time they came back and bought from me. And from the moment I started that particular approach, I never had any trouble selling lawn mowing businesses. And I applied the same principle to selling franchises. We call it in gyms selling by not selling. So instead of trying to convince them, I talk to them about business and how to be successful. And I say, I want you to go out on the road. But one thing, I'm going to have a look at the business, decide if it's for you, but also we're going to be checking you out. And if you don't do a good job, if we're not happy, we won't accept you. And that was quite real. If I thought somebody wasn't good at customer service, I would not accept them. So they were actually trying to persuade me they were good enough to be in my franchise, even though I have virtually no franchisees up against a stronger competitor. Because I had
That's
a system
interesting.
that I really wanted them to be successful. And once they started, I would really look after them. I would answer their calls. I'd ring them. I'd just do anything I could to make them successful. I busted my gut in every way, and I really cared about them. And it used to spread. And then people come to me about a business and why should we buy from you rather than a competitor? They're bigger than you. They're better established. They've got a fancy office. You're running it from your basement. And I say, okay, here's a list of my franchisees with their phone numbers. Ring them. Ring all of them. Ask them. And they'd ring them and the guys would say, Jim is good. Jim looks after us. Jim is the best. Go with him. And that's what happened. I wasn't selling at all. I was just helping people to succeed.
You was just bringing a quality service and not trying to take advantage of others. And because of that, people reciprocated by trusting you.
Yeah, they do. The biggest concern people have in Jim is these days is what happens when I retire. And I said, I'm never going to retire. I'm going to live for another 20 years. Don't count on me going away because I care for my franchisees. Look, I'm so concerned about my guys that what might happen to me after I'm no longer around to protect them, because there are some actual vultures in franchising. I've actually put a clause in my contract that says the majority control of Jim's group cannot be sold without the written consent of a majority of franchisees. And I'm also giving my franchise the right to elect director for the board, because I want them to be looked after. And they know that. And they know that I care about them. And they know that if they contact me, I'll give them an answer and I'll do whatever I can to make them successful. That's what makes it work.
Jim, you about to have me buy a franchise, man. You're pretty good. Now, was there ever time? What's that?
I said it's a healthy life. Going out there,
I
physical
hear
work,
you.
and people are so stuck in desk jobs. What's wrong with going out and mowing lawns or cleaning or building fences or doing windows? There are great jobs. They pay well. Our typical franchisee
And,
makes well over the average Australian income, and you don't need any qualifications. You don't even need to complete high school.
yes, that's true. And you get to breathe some fresh air too.
Absolutely.
Now, was there ever a time where you were close to losing it all, Jim?
No, not really. Well,
Not really? Okay.
I
Well, that's
don't
good.
I don't believe in taking one advice. My father was an entrepreneur, but he did say one thing: don't gamble where you can't afford to lose. Don't bet the farm. My business has always been profitable. From the time I was pushing a lawnmower around to subbies, to selling lawn mowing rounds, to franchising, I always was profitable. The only really hard
And,
time
and
came after my first divorce, when I really had a bad time with my ex-wife, and that was very difficult. But it wasn't the business itself. It always made money.
so I'm wondering now, how did you overcome? Well, you said that at some point when you had trucks and other things on the road, people saw you differently. But how did that transition come about? How did you overcome being seen as just a lawn mowing guy to building a credible business, a credible, the credibility that comes with what you have now?
But I didn't even think of it that way, because I didn't have the vision. If somebody had told me I'm going to have 5,500 franchisees one day, I'd say, "What are you smoking? Come on, it's something." You're into some narcotic illegal substance if you think something like that. I never even occurred to me. I just kept on doing what I did better. When I was mowing a lawn, how can I do it better? How can I do it faster? When I was selling lawn mowing businesses, how can I be more effective? How can I help people to succeed? How can I How can I encourage them? And when I had a franchise, the same thing. I was just simply looking at my franchisees and saying, how can I help you? I wasn't focused on building a big brand. I was very surprised when it started to become, people started to see these trailers all over the place, these green trailers. I was just shocked by it. I just didn't expect it. It just, you look at it now, it looks like, I was destined for greatness, but I didn't see it at the time. I just didn't see the potential. I just kept on trying to make little decisions to improve, focusing on the core issues. And I think people make a mistake. They look at the big issues, how can I create a great brand? No, think about how can I create a really happy customer? And then how can I create a really happy franchisee? Focus on the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves.
Now, I've noticed over the years that when it comes to individuals that have success, they view things that go wrong as learning lessons. Were there any mistakes that you made early that turned into some of your most valuable lessons?
I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. I don't know how many lessons. A big lesson is not to go into things you don't understand. I have tried that many different kinds of businesses, from trade exchange to tourism to mower shop to computer shop to factory building, um, trailers, fiberglass trailers, to a psychology institute. I tried all kinds of different things, and virtually in all of them I come a cropper. I just find that when I stick to what I know and try and improve what I know, I tend to do better. Look, the only thing I'd say is that um, the best decisions I ever made were decisions I made against what I thought was my own self-interest. If I did something because I
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, for example, okay, you want to start a lawn mowing business. Now, it's pretty obvious that one thing you want to do if you want to grow as a franchise is you want as many people as possible. So you don't want to be knocking people back, because that way you have less franchisees. And even if you think somebody's not suitable, you might be wrong. They could be good. So obviously, from a commercial point of view, as all my competitors thought, you don't select. You just take anybody who comes. If they don't work out, well, then they go away. You get somebody else, but at least you got more money. Now, I wouldn't do that because I thought it was wrong. I just didn't, I couldn't stomach the idea of selling a business to somebody that I didn't think was going to succeed, to the extent that I would really put them to the hard grind to make sure they were successful. So I thought that was a decision that would completely, that's why I thought I'd never overtake a competitor that had 250 franchisees, because I would never compromise. But the strange thing was that particular decision, taken purely from the point of ethics and morality, turned out to be a phenomenally good decision, because my franchisees on average were so much happier than anyone else, and they were doing well and recommending other people. And because they gave great customer service, the leads started coming in faster and faster. So they got busier, and those who were working were better off. And there was a positive vibe, and people were supporting each other and had this mood. So a decision that I made purely for ethical reasons turned out to be a fantastically good business decision. But the same principle as before. When I was talking about selling lawn mowing rounds, I told those three guys to buy elsewhere. I told them to go away. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. I had to be honest. I had to give them the advice I promised them, even though I was giving away my business. And I thought that would make my business fail to work. In practice, something that was done purely for ethical point of view actually was fantastically good business advice. But that's not why I did it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Many entrepreneurs starting out, they may underestimate the grind, as it were. Tell me about your hardest years. What were they like, and how did you push through those years?
Look, it was hard in the beginning. Basically, it was difficult. I was very short of money, but I didn't find it that hard. I felt a sense of mission. I felt that God had given me a mission that I had to do. I had to succeed in this area because I wanted to pursue my research. So giving up wasn't really an option. I just don't have it. Look, honestly speaking, the hardest thing that ever happened to me by far was after my divorce. My wife cut off access to my children. I had 5 children, and she cut me off for 2 years to try and get more money out of me. Um, that was shocking. That was terrible in the extreme. That was the most grim, dreadful experience of my life. And even though it's like, you know, 30 years ago now, I still get nightmares about it. It was just awful. There's nothing in business that's ever compared with losing my children for that period of time.
Yes, I can imagine. And that is something that's interesting you bring that up. And the reason I say it's interesting is because in order to be successful, whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, or whatever, you have to be focused. Sometimes I've talked to entrepreneurs and they say that they would change certain things about how they balance their family life with their business life. So it's interesting to hear you say how important the family life was for you. And because of that situation, that made it hard for you. Those years were hard, not necessarily the business itself, but the personal things you dealt with while trying to run a business.
Mm. Look,
So,
I've never felt a conflict, honestly. I've always had time for my kids. There's a saying that goes, no other success can compensate for failure in the home. I absolutely believe that. In fact, the new book that's just coming out is called No Other Success, and it's talking about that aspect of family. Meaning means more than anything. I even though I'm look, people talk to me because I'm successful, but I don't put becoming wealthy as even in my top 10 priorities. My family is more important than that. My research foundation. I actually give away about 90% of my income to my research. I live quite modestly still because it's not a matter of wealth, it's about meaning and purpose. People's lives should have purpose. Just going for more and more money is a miserable way to live. There's got to be a reason for getting up. And the reason is my family, my franchisees, my research. I have a life that's very driven by purpose.
I want to talk a little about your research after I finish talking about Jim's group, because I do have some questions about that. Um, I do want to know something. Now, you talked about customer service was critical. So, customer service has to do with not necessarily getting everything right, but mainly a perfectionist mentality with trying to satisfy the customer.
Yep.
My question to you is, how did you manage the tension between the personality of trying to satisfy the customer, but at the same time dealing with some franchisees, they may not have had the same mental attitude as you?
We are very tough on customer service. You know, I give a session, an hour and a half at the beginning of our generic training course, and I really give it to them really hard. I say, this is what I'm going to say. You're not going to like it all. And I talk about the systems we use, the complaints, the warnings, the lead fee system, all kind of things that drive customer service. I said, this is very, very tough. If you don't like this, then don't join us. So I make it very clear. That means to say that if they've done something wrong, we will do whatever it takes. I personally contact clients. If a client rings the office more than once about a complaint without a response, I will personally respond. I'm the CEO of a company that turns over $1 billion a year. I personally respond to customer complaints, and I'll make sure that if they've got a genuine case, then we will fix it up, whatever it costs. We have a thing called a warranty fund. We will pay for it. We'll get somebody else to do it. Even if a fence was built 5 years ago and it's fallen down, it was clearly wrongly made, we will fix it, and I'll make sure that happens. So,
How do the franchisee feel about that? You contacting their client?
well, they they know me well enough to know that they can't get away with it. But I'll tell you something though too. If the franchisee is in the right, I don't care what the customer says. We'll support the franchisee. Absolutely, we will
Okay.
categorically. And sometimes clients try and rip you off. There's a saying the customer is always right. Well, that's balderdash. Sometimes they are completely rip-off merchants. They don't want to pay or they complain about nothing. We'll investigate. If the franchisee in the right, 100%, we're for you. We will have your back.
Excellent, excellent. Let's talk a few minutes about insights and the lessons that you learned. How did your background in history and research shape the way you approach business?
Has no effect at all. I'm sorry to say.
None,
No, the
none.
only thing
So,
they've got in common is that my research career failed because I was wildly unconventional. could go against every explanation that everybody's had for things that happen. You know, you want to know why
Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
because that's what I think's the truth. Because if you want to know, for example, why the First World War took place, you can get historians who'll give you a whole stack of reasons. And I'll say, no, it's not because of that. It's because of a lemming cycle. It's the same reason as causing lemmings. And I give you all the evidence to support that. It's wildly, wildly unorthodox. Now, the same thing when I came to franchising, I looked at the whole franchising industry and I said, I'm going to make a system that's best for franchisees. I don't care what anybody else done. There's about 10 things in Jim's which is unique in the world of franchising. You can vote out your own franchisor. You can veto changes to your manual. There's a whole stack of stuff which is really extraordinary. So the innovative mindset is the thing that I've got in common. It's my superpower, if you like. I'm just very, very original in my thinking.
Okay.
Apart from
What did
that,
you learn about
nothing in
leadership?
common.
Well, that's a lot though, Jim. That's important. You know, the innovative thinking. But what did you learn about leadership from building a business filled with everyday people and not just corporate managers? Because leading a company with a board is a lot different than leading several entrepreneurs. Because remember, they own their own company, they franchise. So now you're dealing with these type of individuals who may have the same mindset with you, but you have to oversee it. So how do you deal with that?
Well, employing people is very hard. I wouldn't say I was very good at it. My wife's helping me a lot in business now. She's wonderful. We married 24 years, and she's got a good. I've learned to rely on her advice and help. She's very good on the back end. She also runs a conference center and a cleaning business, building business. She's a very capable lady. So I've learned to find other people who are good at things that I'm not good at. I'm not actually good at very much. I really am not. I'm a very innovative thinker. I care deeply about my franchisees, and I can express that. I can talk that. I can inspire people. But as an actual business executive, I'm pretty pathetic. But
Well, I
that's
think you're
part of the
being,
thing.
I,
You got to know what you're good
Jim.
at. and you're not good at.
I think you're being humble, Jim, and that's good. But you're good at enough things to get things accomplished, and that's all that it takes. In hindsight, what's something that you may have done differently building this empire of Jim's group?
Well, I wouldn't have done so many of the wild and expensive side projects. I should have recognized my wife's value much earlier. I really do. That's a hard-earned lesson. She's helped me a lot lately, and I should have learned to rely on her. So sometimes I make some very bad decisions. I trust the wrong people. I try and put somebody in a kind of to be the back end running the company type of person, and I made some terrible mistakes. Mostly the wrong people.
Okay. Now, to those who are listening and viewing who are aspiring entrepreneurs, what advice would you give someone starting today with nothing but a side hustle and a big dream?
So there's two things. There's two things that matter. First of all, be absolutely obsessed with your customer. Turn your customers into raving fans. Always try and look after them the best way you possibly can. But the second thing is you work relentlessly to improve everything you do. Every day you ask yourself the question, every hour of the day, how can I do this better? It's not the big things, it's not the giant dreams, it's not the idea of becoming, Elon Musk or someone like that. It's the tiny little things. How can I navigate between jobs more effectively? How can I express myself to people? How can I redesign what I'm doing? Every day of my life, I'm thinking the same question, how can I improve? It's the thousand little things. And the great thing about this, and I love the service industry, you can start from nothing, absolutely nothing, and you can achieve absolutely everything if you simply are passionate about customers and say, how can I do it better?
Excellent. If you lost everything tomorrow, Jim, and had to start over, what's the first step you would take to rebuild?
Well, I'd go into the service industry of some kind. If I was up against me, my own company, I'd find that very difficult to be successful. I try and find something that other people aren't doing that well. I don't think I would never go into business for fast food like McDonald's. They're too good at what they do. So you don't go into an area where somebody is hugely successful, but you find something that is a niche, something you can do yourself. I love the service industry. The service industry is great. My impression is that most people are very bad at what they do. Most companies are very bad at what they do at that level. If you go in and you're even moderately, reasonably good, you can achieve very good success. Go for a business. Be I think one of the big mistakes people make is they try and think in terms of, tech and all kinds of highfalutin stuff. Now, unless you're a tech genius, which is different, most of us ordinary people don't have that kind of brilliance. It's better to go into something that's basic, something that I can do well in an area where there's not that much competition. See, most companies are terrible at what they do. They don't return phone calls. They don't, I had a situation where I wanted to get advice from from consulting companies. I actually approached 6 companies that had been recommended to me, sent them emails. One replied after 3 months. The rest never replied. Now, this is somebody who's offering you a six-figure contract, and you don't even reply to your bloody emails. How pathetically bad is that? And people are like that. They don't respond. They don't do the basics. I respond. Somebody emails me. I respond every day. If there's a worthwhile thing coming on my email, particularly from a franchisee, potential new division, supplier, anybody, I am there. I watch it. I respond. I do it very efficiently, very quickly, but I read my emails. Little basic things like that people don't do. It's often the little stuff. People have too much
Yes.
in the mind, the grand vision. I want to be like Steve Jobs, and I want to be standing up on this. No, don't think about that. Think about the tiny things that you do, the little things, the little opportunities. What's going on around you? What's the needs? What's not being felt? What's your frustration? Things that require no capital, just a bit of sweat equity. That's where anybody can flourish.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. I want to, before we wrap things up, I want to get a chance to hear you tell the audience about some other things that you're involved in. Your research, epigenetics is one thing that I have studied about. Me and a friend of ours, we talked about this for the last few years. And when I start researching you for the interview, I noticed you work with a lot of things when it comes to research and science. You also have a book out. So tell us about some of the other things you're doing, Jim.
Okay. The central thing is my research project. Um, I looked at what happens when societies change and why things go bad, why civilizations collapse. And I can see things going really problematic in our current world today. One of them is the plunging birth rate. We are not having nearly enough children to replace ourselves. People are turning away from marriage and family. We're having less and less kids. And in the youngest generation is even more extreme than beyond. So it's going to continue. Beyond that, there's rising levels of mental illness. There's deaths of despair. There's suicide, drug overdoses, alcohol poisoning. There is misery. There's a loss of community, a loss of purpose, a loss of meaning. Now, I believe that what's happening is there's an actual change in people's character driven by wealth. So what we're doing with rat models is we're looking at the effects of mild food restriction, which is a way of counting back against this. We're trying to work out ways to change character by developing drugs, by epigenetic treatments, by use of CRISPR to try and work out ways of reversing this, to making people and societies healthier. That is the big mission of my life. And there's a book coming out early next year called Birth Rate Crisis, which will talk about this.
Okay, great. And you have do you have more than one published book?
Yeah, the other book that's just come out is called No Other Success. That's just being released. It should be available on Amazon fairly soon. At the moment,
And what's that about?
that's about my business and about my franchisees. It's about how I did it. It's the story we've talked about, but it's also the story about other people. People like Dan Cale, who's a high school dropout who bought a lawn mowing business from me in his early 20s, and he's now a multi-millionaire. He's 32 or whatever, and he's just an incredible entrepreneur. Somebody that society would have written off. And there's people whose lives have been
Right.
turned around and their families are working better. Those kinds of stories. There's some wonderful stories.
Those are awesome stories. So, thanks for being on the show, Jim. I really appreciate it. And for those who are listening and watching, what Jim Penman showed us today is that the road to success is never smooth. From starting with just $24 in a lawnmower to building one of the largest franchise networks in the world. His journey proves that resilience, vision, and relentless commitment to service can transform even the humblest beginnings into something extraordinary. For every aspiring entrepreneur listening, the message is clear. Obstacles aren't stop signs. They're the training ground for growth. Whether it's rejection or limited resources or the pressure to prove yourself, the way you respond to challenges will define your path. If Jim's stories inspired you, share this episode with someone who needs it as a reminder. And remember, don't forget to subscribe, share, and rate this podcast, please. And as always, keep innovating, keep creating, and never stop unveiling the innovator in you. Until next time, I'm your host, A.D. Edwards, signing off.
You've been listening to Ingleside Reviews, Innovators Unveiled. Our passion is to take you on a journey into the minds behind the most cutting-edge products hitting the market today. It's an honor to have on the show the creative geniuses shaping our future. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. Hit our website at inglesidereviews.com. On Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Ingleside Reviews. And on Twitter at Ingleside Review. See you next time.